2013 at the Vatican was surely one of the most eventful years in living memory. Here are the highlights at a glance. The year began quietly with the announcement that, following more than 7 years in office, Pope Benedict XVI had completed a cycle of formal visits from the world's bishops. A few weeks later, Pope Benedict himself announced a rather more important milestone when he told a gathering of cardinals that he would become the first pope to resign in more than 600 years. In March, Cardinal Jorge Maria Bergoglio of Buenos Aires, Argentina, was elected pope, the first man from the Americas and the first Jesuit to hold the office. He was also the first to take the name Francis. The Vatican also announced that Pope Francis would not move into the papal apartments in the Apostolic Palace, but remain in the Vatican guest house, where he had stayed during the conclave. In April, Pope Francis named an international group of 8 cardinals to advise him on governance of the Universal Church and reform of the Vatican bureaucracy. In May, Pope Benedict returned to the Vatican from the papal residence at Castel Gandolfo, where he had been living during the transition period. He moved into a refurbished monastery within the Vatican walls. In June, leaked notes from a private meeting between Pope Francis and the leaders of religious orders in Latin America provoked a sensation, with comments attributed to the Pope referring to a supposed gay lobby inside the Vatican. In July, the Vatican announced that Pope Francis would canonize both Blessed John XXIII and Blessed John Paul II. That announcement came the same day the Vatican published Pope Francis's first encyclical, which he acknowledged had been written mostly by his predecessor. The Pope also visited the southern Mediterranean island of Lampedusa, a major entry point for immigrants without permission to enter Europe, where he decried hostility and indifference to the immigrants' plight. Pope Francis traveled to Rio de Janeiro to lead World Youth Day celebrations and announced that the next World Youth Day would take place in 2016 in Krakow, Poland. On the papal plane back to Rome from Rio, he held a no-holds-barred press conference, taking questions on such controversial topics as homosexuality in the priesthood, divorced and remarried Catholics, the ban on female ordination, and corruption in the Vatican. Pope Francis worked through August at the Vatican, breaking with his predecessor's summertime tradition of relocating to the cooler climate of Castel Gandolfo. In September, in response to the escalating civil war in Syria, Pope Francis led a prayer vigil for peace, drawing 100,000 people to St. Peter's Square. Later in the month, Jesuit Father Antonio Spadaro published a wide-ranging interview with the Pope that touched on his missionary vision and struck a new evangelical tone when he said that the Church can not only insist on issues related to abortion and homosexuality. In October, the Vatican announced a Synod on the Family to be held in October 2014, which Pope Francis indicated would pay particular attention to the situations of divorced and remarried Catholics. In November, at a Mass in St. Peter's Square to conclude the Year of Faith, Pope Francis venerated the bones of St. Peter, the first time the relics had ever been exposed for public veneration. The Vatican also published the Pope's first apostolic exhortation, The Joy of the Gospel, in which he outlined his vision for a missionary church close to the poor and the most marginalized of society. In December, during his second round of meeting with the Council of Cardinals, the Pope accepted their proposal for an international commission dedicated to protecting children against sexual abuse.